Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Arn. It's Tuesday. You know what that means. And we couldn't be here without the one and only founder of the Four Horsemen, the Hall of Famer himself, Double A, the enforcer, Arn Anderson. Arn, how are you, man?
Fantastic questions. You got some questions for me today?
Dude, I got so many. We had like 400 replies on Twitter. There's no way we'll get to them all. Fans are really digging getting to pick your brain. We should mention, by the way, that they're actually getting a chance to do that over at adfreeshows.com. Even though last week when I asked, you absolutely shut it down. Mrs. Anderson is going to do some questions on adfreeshows.com. How in the world did you sell this?
Well, number one, she will tell you quickly she's never been Mrs. Anderson. and I've never been Arn. Those words have never came out of her mouth, which she will point out if you ask her.
You know, it's funny because one of the first times I had the pleasure of hanging out with her, I think it was like a WrestleMania weekend, maybe in Dallas. And I just happened to be bellied up to the bar, and she came over and said, "Oh my gosh, Conrad," and sat down and we started talking and in conversation. And of course I'd met her before and she's great and gracious and we had a good time. But every now and again she would say Marty, and I'm thinking, who the hell is she talking about? Like I'm in total wrestling mode. It's WrestleMania weekend. And I'm thinking, surely to God, Mrs. Lundy's not friends with Janetti. Like who is she talking? Skrull? No, she wouldn't know who that. Who in the world is that? And then it clicks like, oh shit, that's her actual husband's name. I've just known him as Arn my whole life.
Yeah. And everyone that knew me when I wrestled, we had this, discussion here a while back. Everyone that knew me when I was a wrestler, they're stuck. I don't care if they're our neighbors. They're stuck on Arn because hey, I cash my check at the bank as Arn Anderson. That's the way it was, Conrad. I flew as Arn Anderson. I had no ID other than I had frequent flyer cards in Arn Anderson's name. That was a real person. Once 9/11 came along and all that, everything changed and all that, probably even before that. But for a period, you could go and cash your check at the bank under your wrestling name. Different times, different regulations.
Let's, man, it's so, we could talk about that all day. It's fascinating to me that this is such a weird subculture. Like there's no way Michael Keaton never cashed a check made out to Batman. You know what I mean? Like, but for some reason, like no one would even approach, Val Kilmer on the street and say, "Oh, look, it's Batman." Nobody, that's not a thing. But somehow in wrestling, we want to believe that you wake up and go to bed as Arn Anderson. And, part of that is used to convince us, being a horseman isn't something you put on in the morning and take off at night. We just assume, oh no, these are fucking real life guys. And then one day you meet the real life Ric Flair and you realize, well, that's not exactly like Ric Flair, but pretty close. And then you read Arn Anderson, or so you think, and he's not exactly Marty Lund. It's just weird to me that this only exists in wrestling.
Well, let me calm your nerves here a minute. From the moment I was knighted Arn Anderson, I was never Marty Lundy again through my wrestling career. It was only after I became an agent and, had a different job and things were the way they were, that I, just accepted, hey, you're Marty Lundy, you're Martin Lundy. That's it. You're not Arn Anderson anymore. And there were people that, would come up and go, and I would catch myself saying this, and I wasn't trying to be mean or be a smart ass. I really, really wasn't. People would come up and say, hey, you're Arn Anderson, aren't you? And I would say, I used to be. And when you think about that, that's almost kind of sad, but that's just the way I felt at the time when the wrestler Arn Anderson, the performer Arn Anderson was no longer able to do any of that. Then I probably shouldn't even be that guy or pretend to be that guy anymore.
Oh man, let's try to pull the nose up a little bit. Let's do some questions here on Ask Arn Anything.
Let me stop you.
Okay.
Before we go downhill, and it wasn't meant to go downhill, can you imagine the lady sitting up at the bank window? Guy pulls in, his head sticking through the moonroof, and he hands you a check with one man gang on it. Now, if you cash that check, I'm going to check your competency as working at the bank.
Well, in fairness, if his head is sticking through the sunroof, you might just look at him and say, checks out.
Mr. Gang, thank you. Have a good day.
Mr.
Here's
Gang.
a wad of cash.
That's tremendous. Mr. Gang. Ken Patera's pet raccoon, Josh, wants to know, how did Arn like having Jimmy Hart as his manager in WCW for a short period when the Horsemen and the Dungeons sort of teamed up together?
Jimmy's a high energy guy. Jimmy's a guy that you want to have on your team as far as, always bringing that energy and always having a positive attitude about everything that goes down. And he was just one of those guys that you could ask Jimmy to literally do anything, and he would be more than willing. He's really one of those upbeat guys that you just want to have him on your team. He's the greatest utility guy probably ever. Doesn't matter what you ask him to do. He will get it done if he can't do it himself. So, he wasn't really our manager, but I guess he was part of that grouping for that particular storyline. And, I was glad to have Jimmy around.
Another question here from Ken. He wants to know, in Arn's opinion, was there a difference between Hulk Hogan in the WWF and Hulk Hogan in WCW? And if so, what was it?
I don't think so. Hulk is Hulk 24 hours a day. Ric Flair is Ric Flair 24 hours a day. There are some guys that no matter what environment they're in or what the scenario is, they're that guy because they really are that guy. I don't think Hulk Hogan has been Terry Bollea for a long, long time. Now, I really don't. And I think he's been Hulk Hogan. First time he strapped it on, he became that guy, and he has continued to be that guy. I know his business thoughts and concepts were pretty much the same. And as far as his business head goes, I just think that when the NWO thing hit, and it was such a culture shock, and it thing flamed up. I mean, it literally was like a nuclear blast on the wrestling business. Then he became that other guy, Hulk Hogan, and he was a different guy. There was a viciousness in that guy, and there was a maliciousness in that guy. from taking off that weight belt and beating David Flair half to death with it. That wasn't Hulk Hogan. That was Hollywood Hogan. So he switched characters. He went pretty dark pretty quick, which meant he had been thinking about it, I think, for some time. I don't know how natural that would be because, the red and the yellow, vitamins, prayers, all that stuff, that was part of who he was. And for a long, long time, it's very successful.
It's interesting to think about the way he was presented. It does feel a little different to me, the way he was presented in the WWF versus WCW. And I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's just the WWF by nature was aimed at more children, preteens, and maybe WCW skewed a little older.
Could have been. Could have been. Well, and you think about it, the WWF was, a lot of their revenue, a lot of who they were as a company were these mammoth buildings in these big cities, full house shows where he would come out and the music and the presentation and all those things, he was Hulk Hogan, that entrance, the whole thing. It was based around house shows. And WCW was more of a TV company. We weren't generating that kind of business until things flamed up. But the whole presentation of Hulk for a live event where there's no time constraints, there's no issues there, is completely different from the way you have to contain it for TV. And maybe that's part of the difference.
Let's talk a little bit about well, maybe it's a rib. We got a weird question that I don't even want to read, but it's basically wanting to know how a guy getting an erection would be handled in a wrestling match. And I don't really know that I even want to go down that road, but I assume that there's a lot of good natured ribbing when just, nature takes its course. And it makes me wonder, in the last 20 years, during the rise of, Viagra and things like that, have there been a lot of ribs where guys would sort of bomb somebody's drink before they go out, and now they're out there trying to wrestle 2 matches?
I know where the rib is. You're ribbing me by this whole scenario, aren't you?
Well, listen, the question was, Arn, I was at a house show when during a tag match, Mr. Perfect had an obvious raging boner, but while on the apron waiting for a tag, has this ever happened to you? If so, how do you try to cover it in such revealing attire? And I thought, that's a little weird to ask, but I wonder if that's been involved in a rib, because I could totally see, Mr. Perfect had a reputation for bombing people's drinks back in the day to make them pass out on a plane or whatever, allegedly, according to the rumor and innuendo. But it does make me wonder, when this drug started to maybe rise to prominence a little bit, pardon the pun, did somebody think, oh man, let's put that in his drink or his food before he goes out? This will be fucking hilarious.
Well, I can tell you this, Blue Chew is pretty fast acting.
Yes, it is.
It's pretty potent. Okay. Let's grant that. But let me just tell you what would go down just exclusively the way I would handle it. Okay.
Okay.
If I'm stomping a guy's brains out and I look down and he's laying in a pup tent, you're going to get an immediate count out.
Yeah.
I'm going to the back, Jack, because things are not the way they should be. He's enjoying this a little too much.
It's such a weird question. Let's keep going.
It's your best rib this year. Let me put it to you that way.
Oh, by the way, you know what? We never really talked about this, but I put a poll up. Did you know this? That I put a poll up and let the fans decide who was right once and for all about this whole cheese and bacon thing?
I knew it. And I'm going to before you even announce it. Okay. Can you feel me? Did you hear me getting down on my knees here? I am salami and bologna in you. Salami, bologna, the whole thing. The flying carpet, praying to the God. Okay, you got me. It was a rout, right?
It was a route.
Cheese in a landslide.
6,517 votes on this. The question was, you can only have one on your burger for the rest of time. Which would you choose? Cheese or bacon? Bacon gets 24.2%. Cheese gets more than 3 times as much, 75.8. That's a house rule right there.
To all you cheese lovers, I stand corrected. You know, I'm a lot of things. I'm not a liar. I must be missing something because you have clearly kicked the shit out of me on this one.
Well, it's okay. It's all right for you to be wrong every now and again. Don't beat yourself up too bad.
Oh, you're enjoying this. You kidding me? You're trying to be humble and gracious. You're laughing your ass off right now.
Well, I knew I was going to win. I mean, cheese is undefeated.
Yeah, it's certainly looking pretty good right now, isn't it?
Mike Calandro wants to know, do you have any George South stories you can share?
Yes. George South. And I think we might have, did we have this another week recently? I think.
Yeah, we have, but it's worth asking again because I'm sure you got a lot of George South stories.
I cannot thank you enough for bringing up George South's name. George, now I'm 61. I'm not sure how old he is, but he was in the business when I first started going to Jim Crockett. We were doing Atlanta TV and doing the television, which would have been in March of '84. George was already in the business, and he was already an accomplished hand. And man, I watched him a couple of times and I went, this guy should be on the regular crew. What the hell? And got a chance to work with him myself, and he was just as smooth and polished as a 5-year veteran, and was such a pleasure and such a gentleman, to do business with. And he was just one of those guys. I always felt there should be a spot on any crew for a guy like George. He's a tremendous performer. He's a tremendous human being, and just an all around nice guy.
Yeah, it is interesting that he doesn't have, it feels like he should be an agent somewhere, right? I mean, goodness gracious, that guy's forgot more about wrestling than a lot of guys will ever know, me included.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he has his own wrestling school. I think that's probably where those feelings, and I'm sure he has them because, he's always been a guy that he is kind of coached, you know. I'm sure a lot of nights he went to the ring on television and the wrong guy went over. George should have probably won the match if we're going by that. But yeah, I mean, he's tremendous.
Let's keep it moving here. We've got an interesting question about Jerry Lawler. Robert wants to know, everyone has their top list of wrestlers that never won the world title in the NWA or WCW or WWE. The name I don't hear very often is Jerry Lawler. You think with how over Jerry was in the Memphis territory, he would have made a great NWA champion?
You would probably have to ask Jerry the most defining part of that being the world champion. If he would have been willing to be in a different city, state, country, 300 and probably 50 days a year round. Because, the world champion back in the day, the true world champion, when it was territories and traveling, he was literally all over the world. And I would think some of the guys that were qualified, like a Jerry Lawler, and was, pretty well politically plugged in. Jerry Jarrett was part of that NWA clique of promoters, I would think. And certainly his performance warranted him being the world champion. His business sense warranted it, but I'm not sure that the guys that were smart enough to know, hey, this guy's going to be here today. He's going to be out on the West Coast tomorrow. He may go to the Caribbean the next day and be back somewhere in Europe the day after that. I mean, the schedule was just unbelievable. Fly over to Japan for a couple of days, come right back, sometimes one shot, fly all the way round trip to Japan. Try that one on sometime. I think Jerry would have qualified through his work and all of his assets to be the world champion. I just don't know how many guys, could handle that schedule. And you got to remember, some nights and a lot of nights you would get to the town 60 minutes. That was your future. Go wrestle 60 minutes and make their top star better than he was before you got here. When you leave town, he's better off than he was before you got here. It's a pretty tall challenge, and not a lot of people could have pulled that off.
Right. Let's do another question here. This one is about weight limits. Rory wants to know, what are Arn's thoughts on having weight divisions like cruiserweights and heavyweights in pro wrestling? Also, is the cruiserweight champion the equivalent to the heavyweight champion?
I've always been a proponent of height and weight, not as important as performance and ability to connect with the audience and get over. There might have been a part of me before I stepped through the ropes with Ricky and Robert that had an idea in my head, just like everybody else did, of what a wrestler was supposed to look like and what a badass was supposed to look like. And, who the killers were and weren't at that time, because there were a lot of them in the business. When you go in the dressing room and you're walking around with Billy Jack Haynes, you're walking around with Barbarian, Warlord, the Steiners, the Road Warriors, all these guys, these monsters, Ron Simmons, all these guys, you had it in your head. God damn, the guy's a killer. That guy's a killer. But when you stepped through the ropes of the Rock and Roll Express and you saw how they could go out and sell and get over, never die, stay in the fight, keep fighting, and just the connection they had with the audience forever, for me, took that height and weight, what I thought was right, out of the quotient. I don't think anybody will ever say Eddie Guerrero was too little, Shawn Michaels was too little. I don't think you're ever going to think Dean Malenko was too little. Rey Mysterio, certainly not too little. All these guys got over, and they were all tops in their field. Nobody is going to question how tall they are. So I don't have any height or weight parameters for myself, and I hope the business has moved ahead just like it has with the women's division and a lot of other things in a positive way. I hope we have forever forgotten how much a guy weighs or how tall he is. It's what he brings to the table.
Well said. Big Extra wants to know, were you ever the agent for an Undertaker match?
You know what? Michael Hayes had that spot bottled up. And it was because he had been with him way before I got there. I may have had a couple of matches, probably a handful, but that's about it. And it was always a pleasure, because there's a guy who was the judge, if you went to Wrestler's Court, for a good reason, the most respected guy in that locker room. And it wasn't because he was the tallest or toughest or made the most money. It's because the way he applied himself to his craft and how he always wanted to be the best he could and bring out the best he could in you, and the competitiveness and the professionalism and all those things that he brought to the table. He was just a true pro.
I don't think anybody will ever get tired of hearing about the Undertaker's career. Keith West wants to know, can you elaborate more on your time in Smoky Mountain?
Guys should go back and pull it up on YouTube or wherever it's available. The angle that we shot of the man underneath the sheet.
Yep.
And you're talking about, I didn't know about it at first, but Jimmy didn't have to sell that to me very hard. I just could kind of figure out this was going to be entertaining. And I'd always been so serious about the business. and was in a position that I had to be, and I had to be business all the time and be in, kick ass mode or getting my ass kicked mode 100% of the time. I could never lighten up and just have fun. And thanks to Jimmy for using me for several days. I was between stints with WCW, and I got to work for him. And man, we shot the angle, and it was so fun working with those guys and being partners. Man, picture this, me partners with the Rock and Roll Express. My God, you're talking about oil and water, but it worked. It absolutely worked. And I enjoyed myself working with the Midnight Express and those guys, and it was just a lot of fun. It was wrestling back at its roots. It was one of those things, it reminded me of when I used to go and watch wrestling live, how excited I got about it. I really enjoyed that. And it was probably the best 3 days, I spent in the business, as far as just having fun, not having to worry about anything business wise, just go out and have a good time. And it would take care of itself.
BLM wants to know, did you ever take part in Tuesday night wrestling at the Louisville Gardens? Weekly shows ran by Jarrett. It was a staple of wrestling in Kentucky when I was young.
No, sir, I never did work for the Memphis territory. So I would not have been at those shows, which I believe was part of his territory at the time.
It is fascinating to think about, even though you did come up in the territory system, you weren't a part of the territories very long as far as days on the calendar before you were with a major company.
Very fortunate. Very fortunate. I would say I had, Bill watched the 5 months I spent there. I learned how to work, which I knew absolutely nothing when I went there. I learned how to drive 3,000 miles a week without ending up in the middle of a swamp, sound asleep. I learned the business from the ground floor up and basically how to wrestle, learned how to be a businessman and being away from home for the first time, I learned how to live away from home and live out on my own, which is some people may laugh at, but when you're driving 3,000 miles a week and wrestling 7 days a week, there ain't a lot of time for picking out furniture and doing housework and cooking and all those things that you have to end up doing when you live by yourself. So, it was a learning experience. And then Atlanta, I went to work for Ole and got to be with Paul Ellering, spend some time with a quality person there. And then I went to Pensacola and my life really changed. And, man, you're talking about the greatest 14 months of my life. Access to the beach 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and short trips. It went from 3,000 miles with Bill Watts to probably 800 or 900 working for the Fullers and Continental, Bob Armstrong. Man, it was awesome. It was just so fun and easy, and just leave the beach and go straight to the town and put on your boots, tear the joint down, get in your car, go back home. Glorious. And then, of course, the Crockett years, the WWF stint, back to WCW, which I was fortunate to be in 12 years, which is a pretty damn good run. Then go to WWE, where I spent 19 years. So I was very, very fortunate. I didn't work all the territories or even most of them. I just was fortunate that wherever I went, I got to stay pretty good, fair amount of time, I would say.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, I did.
Michael Eldridge wants to know, what did you think of the WCW NWA split that happened in the early 90s? As a reminder, this was even a legal matter there for a while. I guess you guys sort of picked up where the NWA left off once Jim Crockett Promotions was done and Ted Turner bought it. We continued with the NWA World Championship, and then slowly but surely, I guess that board of directors, even though it was not nearly what it once was, made a big issue out of that and didn't want certain things to happen. So you guys decided to change the name of the big gold belt to the International Heavyweight Championship, and you introduced a new WCW world title, and
The big gold belt was still there, but it didn't quite carry the same meaning maybe it once did. And you had a new belt made. It was a little confusing for wrestling fans at the time. What did you think about this?
Well, probably more confusing for them than it was for me because I was a WCW employee. I was, that was my new home, and I figured in my ridiculous thought process I was going to be there forever. So all that stuff, all those legal wranglings was kind of, out of my sight, and it was out of my thought process. It was just one of those things that you hear's going on. It didn't change the roster of guys I was working with or who my new employer was. I was kind of over there, and this stuff was all happening kind of, it was just off my radar.
Jeremy Forehand says, Arn, I work at the Mississippi Coast Coliseum in Biloxi, Mississippi. Any memorable stories from those events at the Coliseum, or nights on the town with the Horsemen in Biloxi?
That was always a down and back for Bill Watts. We would drive down and drive back. When I was with WCW, we would stay there, and I'd like to hit those casinos. There's one there that I really liked, and I know you know them all, Conrad. Name some of those that are in Biloxi right there.
The one you like is probably the Beau Rivage.
Beau Rivage. God, you're so good. You're so worldly. It scares me that we're completely on the same wavelength. Man, I love sitting in there with the little old ladies playing the quarter slots. Didn't do any gambling as far as cards or anything that took any concentration. Just order a couple of cold Miller Lights and just sit there and push the button, and just that whole atmosphere I just really enjoy. And usually when we would stay over there, and we would with WCW quite a bit, and WWE for that matter, and fly out of that little airport that was down the road. And it was fun. It was a fun place.
Yeah, Beau Rivage, I think, has been open 20-something years, opened in the very late 90s. But when it did, man, it was like Las Vegas had come to freaking Mississippi. That was a big-time resort. I hadn't been in years, and I don't know when I'll go again now that everything's happening that's happening in the world. But really one of the crown jewels of the area. So I just assumed, knowing the type of shit that you like, you were at the Beau Rivage.
It was upscale. I mean, the rooms were super nice. It was just one of those things that, that it was a casino that belonged in Vegas. Very well said.
Let's talk a little bit about, our main man here. What a great question. Michael wants to know, if there's going to be a film about your life, who would you want to play you in that film?
Well, since everybody claims that I don't age, if you could figure out a way for me to be in a diaper with a beard, I could just play myself.
Oh, that would be fucking great.
Because it's like the Benjamin Button thing. I guess I go up to 40 and except I'm just stuck there. Apparently when I was 14, I'm 40. Now that I'm 61, I'm still 40. So let's just hope my organs and my longevity on this earth follows suit. If so, I got another 80 years or so to live.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because you have been the same age forever. That is the joke that everybody says. When do you think you were able to buy beer without being carded? Were you able to pull that off before you turned 21, just because you looked older than you really were?
Yeah, I want to say probably leaving kindergarten. I must have stopped by the liquor store once or twice.
That's so good. Oh gosh. Scott Norris wants to know, Demolition or the Road Warriors? If you had to pick one, sort of like Elvis or Beatles, are you a Demolition or a Road Warrior guy?
All of the above. Had great matches. I thought Tully and I with both of those teams. And, I had Barry Darso, who is a dear friend of mine to this day, and I enjoyed working with Bill Eadie, and of course the Road Warriors. Conrad, my man, when you're in the ring, You don't have to be Elvis if you're standing over at the side and you're playing the cello or something and you're part of the band and you look at him and you go, that's Elvis. Damn, I'm just glad to be here, be in the mix. Same thing with the Road Warriors. When you're in the ring with those guys, they brought such a credible aura with them, credible look. Just that whole thing was just frightening. And to be in matches with those guys, it just, even though you limp back, you walk out and you limp back and you're beat half to death, you just go, damn, that was fun.
Let's move on. We've got another question here. Timothy wants to know, are you a dry rub or a sauce guy for your barbecue?
Definitely dry rub. No sauce. Little garlic, a little brown sugar, little onion powder, and just kind of dump just a smidgen of Dale sauce on there. I mean, just a smidgen. Rub it all in, wrap it up, put it in the oven. About 3 hours, 2 racks of ribs. You're ready to rock and roll.
I can't believe you're in the loop on Dale's sauce. That's an Alabama original. I didn't know that you were rocking that up there.
You bet. Hey, I'm civilized.
Shout out to Dale's. If you're listening to this and you have no idea what we're talking about, Amazon sells it, but it's Dale's original steak seasoning. And it's been, I mean, my parents have used it literally my entire life, and I believe it's still made right here in Alabama. So check it out if you haven't already. It's a favorite. I think you'll dig it.
Check on that.
SpanishScottish wants to know, what's your thoughts on EC3 and Matt Sydal? Do you think we could ever see them in AEW?
You never know. Matt Slidell, saw probably about a year ago at a signing in, believe it or not, Jacksonville's before I was working with AEW. I went to a signing there and he was there and I talked to him a little bit, and basically he said his body was pretty beat up, be honest with you. That day we were talking, he was limping pretty good. EC3, I don't know if he's better suited for where he is on Impact. I don't know. You never know in this business. I know he's a young guy. He looks great. He's certainly got a lot of years ahead of him in the business. Who knows what the next year will bring, to us all. Look forward to it, and it's going to be interesting to see who goes where and for what reasons and just how the business is going to evolve.
It's a fun time to be a fan. Matt Snyder wants to know, any fun memories of any shows or anything that you did in Little Rock, Arkansas, either during a regional territory or from the WCW or WWF days?
Oh, Little Rock, Arkansas. I know that when I worked for Bill Watts, it was a Thursday town at that time, and that we would drive it because I was just underneath. That was the first match. Wednesday was television. If you were off TV, you wouldn't be in Shreveport, which Shreveport's on the way to Little Rock from where I lived in Baton Rouge. But if you were off TV, now you woke up on Thursday morning with a 400-mile drive. Not only were you going 400 miles one way, I think sometimes on the Friday following that, you would be somewhere like Monroe, Louisiana. And after that, you would go back up to maybe Oklahoma City and Tulsa for a double shot. The one thing I remember was it was 400 miles from Baton Rouge to there, and it was up, I think, Highway 167 or something, but a lot of it and most of it was 2-lane road. And if you've been to Louisiana and you've driven those old roads, they ain't been paved in a while. That was a long 400 miles on Thursday. That's the one thing that stands out. We very seldom ever spent the night there. It was usually just a and work, move on to the next town.
Let's talk about wrestling belts. Francis wants to know, what's your Mount Rushmore of wrestling belts? You've told us before that you were really fond of the NWA television title, the famous one that you carried with the red strap and the silver plates. What are the 3 other belts that you really liked through wrestling?
I think we're going back to the day we talked about earlier when the champion was a traveling champion, the smaller belt, the NWA World Champion, NWA World Title. That was really cool. That looked like a championship belt, felt like one. I did like the TV title. Was kind of how I was my claim to fame. It was kind of cool to be the first team to win the NWA tag titles and the WWF tag titles, which is what Tully and I accomplished. We were the first team to have held both of those. So I would put those 2 sets of championships on Mount Rushmore beside the TV title and the world champion.
Bobby Rogers wants to know, who do you think is the modern day AA in AEW? Is there a modern day Arn Anderson type character in AEW?
Hope not. Because the one thing I preach and the one thing I always tried to do is be different.
Right.
Be unique and be different. And I feel like I was both of those. And other than wallow in the fact that I didn't have a lot of babyface skills or high impact skills or off the top rope skills, I took what I had and what I knew I could do good and tried to make it look as convincing, credible, and believable and fit the story that I was telling, and just be myself. And never did a promo that was scripted. Everything that ever came out of my mouth came from me. And not a lot of people can say that. I kind of hang my hat on that, and I was given freedom to do that. And I'm thankful for that. And I don't think there's another me around. Thank God.
Talk to me a little bit about chicken sandwiches. Undisputed wants to know, we all know how Arn feels about burgers, but where does he get his preferred chicken sandwich?
This is going to open up another can of worms, right?
Oh no, here we go.
Chick-fil-A.
Well, yeah. What's wrong with that? That's like the standard answer.
Yeah. I mean, but I like Wendy's spicy chicken sandwich.
That's pretty good now.
My wife has told me and browbeat me and beat me over the head that I have had a Popeye's chicken sandwich. And I know I'm old and I know I've been beat up a lot and dropped on my head, but for the life of me, I cannot remember it.
It's pretty good.
Now, that's crazy.
They make it with, you can get it spicy or regular. Spicy's the way to go. You'll like that.
Yeah. And it looks fabulous. And I don't know why I wouldn't have had one. And if I have and really don't remember it, because it would have only been one, that's one of those things that I do remember. And I cannot recollect it. And she just gives me that look like, well, you stupid son of a bitch, you've had one of those.
Wholesome Underwood wants to know, any memories of Nighthawk Joe Coltrane? He was around for a couple of months for JCP in '86. with his last recorded match being for the company during a TV title match against you. Do you remember Nighthawk, Joe Coltrane?
No. That was just for television?
Yeah, I mean,
was he a part of the regular crew, or?
I don't know. It says he was only around for 2 months in '86, but he did have a match with you for the TV title. But I don't remember him either, so it flew under mine and your radar.
Somebody may be ribbing us, knowing immediately when we're done, I'm going to start Googling him to find out who the hell that is. And if it is a thing and it did happen, I put that in the chicken sandwich category from Popeyes. I just don't remember it. Damn it.
John wants to know, what'd you think of the match you had with Macho Man on Saturday night in '95 for the TV title? I thought it was a very good match.
I agree. I was, a little starstruck working with Randy. Randy was a big star. And, I was never lost on the fact that the guys I was in the ring with, some of them, a lot of them were big stars in the industry and the biggest. And I was fortunate enough to go out and have some time and wrestle a guy like Randy Savage, in a world television title match, I think it was.
Yeah.
Day one, I think that was the first time I wrestled, was for the title. I may be mistaken about that, but just being in the ring with that guy was, it was challenging, and it was exciting and flattering and fun, all wrapped up in one.
Talking about flattering, there's an interesting question here from Francis. He says, did Vince or any of the guys in the back ever buy you a watch or any sort of trinket, any sort of special memento? I think this comes about because we've heard guys share stories about, so-and-so gave me a gift of so and such, and it really meant a lot. Maybe one of the most famous being with Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels and the big Rolex after WrestleMania. Did anybody ever give you something along your days in wrestling that you think is pretty sentimental and pretty special?
Well, to me it is. And Jamie Noble, who we have discussed a lot on the podcast, is a good friend of mine. And I respect how smart he is and how talented he is and how hard he works and what a great worker he was. I mean, he's one of those guys that if you started pulling out all of his stuff and you put on a midnight watching deal and you watched about 8 hours of him, you would go, good God Almighty, this guy was incredible. Hall of Fame 2012, he gave me with it inscribed, my name on it and everything, a money clip. And that means a lot to me. I mean, it's not a diamond studded anything, but it might, might as well be to me. Has that much value. I've never put $1 in it. It sits in the box, my Rolex box, where I have one of my watches and my Hall of Fame ring and that money clip that Jamie gave me. And I was, about started crying when he did it, because I know it came from the heart and it was very appreciated. And that was a very special weekend, the Hall of Fame weekend. And that just kind of capped it off.
That's a very cool story. And I'm glad you mentioned his name, because it's been said to me that perhaps if Jamie didn't have such a strong accent, he'd be Vince's right-hand man. But maybe Vince has a Southern bias. And 'cause supposedly the guy, Jamie Noble, is a fucking wrestling genius, and he has tons of great ideas and is a team player and contributes on a big level. But for whatever reason, maybe Vince doesn't take him seriously because he is from the South.
I have no idea what the reasoning would be in that, because no matter what you come up with, none of it's good enough, is it? None of it makes sense.
Right.
So to try to analyze that is just one of 1,000 questions you would try to analyze. I know that he is everything that you said he was, and dependable, hardworking, durable, honest, sweetheart of a guy. He's all those things. He's a very valuable commodity to their company. Hope one day they wake up and realize it, because he should be very well respected in this business, because he's got it all.
Wrestling My Shadows podcast wants to know, if you could have wrestled on the final Nitro, who would you have liked to gone out against? That's an interesting question. We know your in-ring career ended beforehand, but if it was going to be your last match on Nitro, on the very last Nitro, sort of the end of the chapter, your in-ring career and WCW all at the same time, who would you have chosen as your opponent?
God Almighty. God, that's almost impossible to even say. I mean, wow, I don't know. Let me think about that.
It's a great question, though.
It's a fantastic question, and it's got, like you say, it's got a lot of meat on the bones. There's a lot of that would have been a match that. Let me just put to you this way: that would have been a match that I would have been more concerned than anything. I would love to go out, had an adequate amount of time, had a guy that I was friends with that could work his ass off. I would love to go out there and give him a good, hard 15-minute quality match. And whatever his finish was, he was going to hit me with it. And 1, 2, 3, right in the middle. And I would have been a very happy camper knowing that was the last time that would ever happen, period.
It's too bad that it didn't happen that way. Let's talk about a fun, silly thing. We have a lot of fun talking about food. Kevin wants to know, were you a dip your fries in ketchup guy or a put ketchup on top of your fries guy?
Fries on the side, pepper on the fries, swirl them around off to the side.
I think that's the move. Matt wants to know, what do you think of the finished design of the TNT Championship, and where do you think it ranks amongst today's wrestling belts?
It's too early yet to tell. It will all depend. The man makes the championship. The championship does not make the man.
Right.
So going by where the champion goes from here, the wars he goes into, how many of those he survives and prevails, how the championship is respected and treated, that all comes from the talent. It's only an important championship if everyone in the room makes it important. If it's number one on the list, that's where they want to aspire to be, then it becomes something. And the champion, just as Cody has done, he has faced all challengers. And just about all the time, he's came out of that thing a winner and his opponent a winner. But I feel like the talent will either decide the fate of the championship or not.
Let's keep it moving here. MJC wants to know, if you had to choose between taking 10 sledgehammer shots from Triple H or 5 barbed wire bat shots from Mick Foley, what would you choose?
Probably the sledgehammer shots. Poor Mick, if he's as limping as bad as the last time I saw him, if he were to swing that thing, he's liable to damn near trip and fall, and on the way down, that bat would rip me in half, I'm sure. I'm not sure Mick is able to aim. His shoulders are probably so bad. He probably can't get that bat up high enough to aim it really, so it's like Stan Hansen with a clothesline. It'll either be from your nose to the top of your chest. You don't know until it lands. I think Mick would be, and just like he would want you to hit him with it, he would probably hit you with it.
Another question here about boots. Scott Price wants to know, when getting fitted for a new pair of boots, did they take a while to break in and cause discomfort, or are they truly tailor made and fit like a glove from day one?
No, you got to break them in just like any kind of shoe, but it doesn't take long. You do have them, you have them cut and measured, and the whole thing is for ankle support. That's what boots are for. Doesn't matter how short they are or how tall they are. They're all for ankle support because you feel completely different when you put on a pair of wrestling boots and lace them up tight. You feel supported. And that's what they're for. And I don't see how guys work in tennis shoes for the life of me. I'd break my ankle every time I went to the ring.
Blake the Snake wants to know, do you have any funny stories about Chattanooga? Do you have any memories of a wrestler from the territory days named Larry Cheatham?
I've heard that name. I think he spent most of his career in Tennessee, didn't he?
I would assume so, since he's dropping Chattanooga.
But was he one of the Moondogs? Am I thinking about the right guy?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Let me look that up.
Because that name rings a bell, but I feel like it was before my time, just by a few years. He might have been one of Nick Goulis's guys, or Jerry Jarrett, or.
Yeah. I don't see any info on it right off the top of my discussion here, but I do see where, very much a territory guy. I think he even, passed away last year, believe it or not. I see his obituary from Cleveland, Tennessee, but I guess he was around Georgia Championship Wrestling a little bit too. And, maybe supposedly lived in Bradley County, Tennessee.
I'm sure I ran into him somewhere on the road or at a TV taping or somewhere. The name rings a bell. I'd have to have a face to go with it to truly remember.
Interesting question here. David wants to know, you always mention fast food places when it comes to hamburger decisions. When you worked in the Northeast, places like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other states, do any diners stick out? The old open 24 hours choice of a great astute burger.
All of them, because that was first selection. God, let's find a diner and let's get some breakfast. And that would be at, that'd be at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, because your only options were that, truly in the Northeast, or those, I guess they're not truck stops, but whatever they're called in the middle of the highway where you could stop and get, Roy Rogers, maybe a fast food, something or other. And they had a little store connected with them. It was like a little truck stop right in the middle of the highway. And they're only up north. It's the only place that has them. So we would try to find those diners, be passing through a little town. We'd just get off and exit, and the food was always fresh and excellent. And we would take that opportunity to have breakfast.
Fun little question to wrap things up today. This one comes from AJ. He says, Arn, excuse me. How do you feel about the Aloha Arn being a thing? I don't know that you've seen this, but our friends over at OSW Review across the pond had a lot of fun with this years ago, where, like, for instance, in WrestleMania 5, when you and Tully are taking on Strikeforce, it looks like Tito is trying to pull you down and do like a sunset flip, and you're staggering back and forth, reaching both left and right with your stance getting wider and wider every time. It's been nicknamed the Aloha Arn or the Hula Arn, depending on who you believe. Did you have a name for that move or that bit that you did?
Yeah, it's called working your ass off.
Yes, it was.
It's adding drama to literally something that nobody ever added drama to beforehand. It's making a struggle to pull me down into a pinning position from a sunset flip, and me working my ass off to not have you do that. That's what that's called.
It's remarkable. What do you remember the first time you did that, or how you came up with it? Was it well received by the boys? Did you know you had a hit when you did it? Because it is quite the visual.
Yeah, and it was, sometimes it was ha ha, sometimes it was, it was actual drama. It was received different ways by everybody. Again, that's one of those things you can point to. You never seen anybody else do it, right?
No.
It's one of those things, and maybe by choice. Maybe they thought it was a screaming shits. I don't know. Nobody ever told me that, but I thought it was my way of being different and making something out of nothing, and taking the tools God gave you and being able to fashion some different stuff that has some interest in a match. It's not necessarily a 450 off the top.
Well, that's going to wrap us up with a little 450 off the top. We hope that your spine buster audio today was a hit, and we'll be back with you next week for Night of the Champions 2015. What an interesting time it was in the company just 5 years ago. But what you remember that show for most of all is the very scary spot with Sting taking the buckle bomb from Seth Rollins and collapsing in the ring. That's your main event. We'll get Arn's take on that and everything else that happened on the way to the show, including Lana and Rusev getting engaged and announcing it on social media to the ire of Vince McMahon. Lots to unpack next week right here on the show. Don't you dare miss it. Don't forget, you can get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. And we've got lots of other fun, special stuff that we're doing on the website as well with Arn, including an Ask Arn Anything, a live Zoom chat with Arn, so much more. You don't want to miss it. It's adfreeshows.com. Until next time, he is at the Arn Show. I am Hey, it's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll talk to you next week right here on Arn.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.